Okay, so for example 5, there is something that we need to know before we begin. And this is this blue information at the top. Essentially, if you have your root, this n here, and it's being raised to the n on the inside, we can instantly know what the answer is depending on whether the n is even or whether the n is odd, okay? So if your n is even, it's the absolute value of the stuff on the inside, and if your n is odd, it's just the stuff on the inside, okay? So let's look at some examples. For number 1, we're asked to find this. So we know because there's not a number there, it's an imaginary 2 because it's being squared, right? So here we have the same n's. Does that make sense? So we know instantly it's going to either be the same thing on the inside or the same thing with the absolute value. Because it is even, it's going to be the absolute value of that stuff on the inside. So we have the absolute value of -3, and the absolute value of -3 is just 3. Okay? Don't be thrown off because there's a negative here, and we've talked about if it's negative, then this has to be odd. The reason why this is different is because this -3 right here is being squared. And whenever you square something, right, it's going to become positive. So this power right here, because it's even, is actually going to get rid of the negative, okay? So for B, same thing. We have that imaginary 2 on the outside because there isn't one. Because they're both 2's and it's even, we know we're going to have the absolute value of the inside stuff, which is just the absolute value of x, and that would be the answer, okay? We don't take off the absolute values here because you don't know what x is. X could be a negative number. Okay, over here we can get rid of the absolute values because it's actually a number, okay? Over here you can't do that, so you need to leave the absolute values. Alright, so for C, again, we have even, which means we're going to be working with absolute values. So we just do the absolute value of the stuff on the inside. So x minus 2. And that would be our final answer. Okay? For D, we have odd. So when it's odd, we just write the stuff on the inside. So we just have -5. Super simple, right? Righty, over here again, we have odd. So we just write the stuff on the inside. And we're done. When it's odd, it's super easy. Right? Next we have F. This one requires a little bit of work, and so does G. Remember there's an imaginary 2 on the outside. This is 2 separate parts here, so I'm going to write this in a different color just to show you guys. So essentially, even though this 2 is the same thing as this 2, these are 2 different things, right? This one's the coefficient and this one's the variable, right? But we need to rewrite the coefficient as the second power also. So what raised to the second power gives you 25? So I'm going to rewrite this. So we have our second power, and then we have x squared. Okay, so what squared gives you 25? 5 squared, right? So now, because both of these are squared, now we can do our trick, okay? Technically, I'm going to rewrite it how this actually is supposed to look for you to be able to answer the question. So technically, because both of these are being squared, you can stick these under one thing. So we can say 5x and then square both of them. Does that make sense? So you figure out how to make sure everything underneath is being squared, right? And then you can take them, put it all under one thing, and then square it all at the same time, okay? So now, both of these are even. Since they're even, we have to use the absolute value signs, and then we just write the stuff on the inside. So that's the absolute value of 5x. Again, remember these are 2 separate things. Let me write this in red. So if it's just a number, we can bring it on the outside of the absolute value, right? And then we need to keep the variable on the inside because we don't know what x actually is. So our final answer is 5 absolute value x. Alrighty. So for this last one, we have the square root of x squared plus 2x plus 1. So what do you guys think that we should try first? We know that we're using this little trick thing where we have the power powers on the outside are the same. I rewrote it over here. Right? We're trying to use this trick on these problems. So we know there's an imaginary 2 here, which means we need to figure out how to rewrite this as something squared, right? So, first thing that I would do is try to factor, right? We did this at the very, very, very beginning of the course, right? So we look at x squared plus 2x plus 1, and we try to factor that. Because your a is a 1, we can regularly factor. And we want to know what adds to give you this positive 2, and what multiplies to give you positive 1. And that would be plus 1 and plus 1. So now I can rewrite this as the square root of x plus 1, x plus 1, right? And since there's 2 of them, I can rewrite that as x plus 1 squared, okay? And again, we still have that imaginary 2 on the outside. So now, we have the same ends. They're even. Because they're even, we have to use our absolute value sign. And then we just write the stuff on the inside, which is x plus 1 for our final answer.